price of lust, what you should know about Samson's biggest mistake. What if I told you that the strongest man who ever lived was brought to his knees, not by a sword, not by an army, but by a single weakness, a weakness that lives in all of us, a weakness that whispers, that tempts, that destroys. This is the story of a man who had it all: strength, power, a divine calling, and lost everything because of lust. His name was Samson, a warrior, a judge, a deliverer of Israel. But beneath the muscles and miracles, there was a battle raging, a battle between his calling and his cravings, and in the end his cravings won. But why? Why would a man chosen by God, gifted with unimaginable strength, throw it all away for a moment of pleasure? And what can his story teach us about the price of our own desires? Imagine this: you're the strongest man alive. You've defeated lions, armies, and nations, but now you're blind, chained, humiliated. Your enemies mock you, and the woman you loved betrayed you. How did it come to this? What was the moment, the decision that cost you everything? And what if I told you you could have avoided it? This isn't just a story about a man who fell. It's a warning, a mirror, a call to ask yourself, what is your weakness? What is your Delilah? And what are you willing to lose for a moment of temptation? Today, we dive into the life of Samson, his rise, his fall, and the lessons we must learn from his biggest mistake. Because the price of lust is higher than you think. Stay with me. This story might just change your life. The divine promise. In the quiet of the night, under a canopy of stars, a promise was made, a promise that would change the course of history. But, like all promises, it came with a price. A test of faith, a test of obedience, and for one couple, it would be the beginning of a journey they could never have imagined. Meet Manoah and his wife, ordinary people living in extraordinary times. Israel was under the thumb of the Philistines, oppressed, broken, and desperate for deliverance. And then, it happened. An angel of the Lord appeared, not with a sword, not with an army, but with a message. A message that would ignite hope and fear. You will conceive and give birth to a son, the angel declared. He will be a Nazirite, set apart to God from birth. And he will begin to deliver Israel from the hands of the Philistines. A son, a deliverer, a miracle, but with this promise came a warning. He must never cut his hair, never touch anything unclean, never drink wine. His strength will come from his obedience. Can you imagine the weight of that moment? The joy of a long-awaited child, coupled with the fear of raising him under such strict conditions. What if they failed? What if he failed? The stakes were higher than they could comprehend. This wasn't just about a child. This was about the fate of a nation. But here's the question. Why a Nazirite? Why such strict rules? And why would God choose an ordinary couple to raise a deliverer? The answers lie in the tension between divine calling and human weakness. Because even the strongest among us are only as strong as our obedience. Samson was born to be a hero, but heroes are not born, they are made, and sometimes they are broken. What would it take for a man chosen by God, gifted with unimaginable strength, to fall from grace? And what can his story teach us about the battles we face within ourselves? Stay with me. Because this is not just the story of a man. This is the story of a warning. A warning about the price of lust, the cost of disobedience, and the power of a single choice. Let's begin. From the moment he could walk, Samson was different, stronger, faster, unnaturally so. His parents raised him as the angel had commanded. No wine, no unclean food, no razor to his head. But as Samson grew, so did the whispers. Whispers of a boy who could lift boulders, outrun horses, and bend iron with his bare hands. A boy destined for greatness, or destruction. Samson wasn't just strong, he was restless. The Philistine oppression was a constant thorn in Israel's side, and Samson felt it more than most. Every insult, every injustice, every cry of his people fueled a fire within him. But here's the question: was it a fire for justice or a fire for revenge? His father warned him, "Stay away from the Philistines, Samson. Your strength is a gift from God, not a weapon for your pride." But Samson wasn't listening. He was tired of waiting, tired of hiding, tired of being told what he could and couldn't do. And so he made a decision that would set the stage for his first great act and his first great mistake. It started with a lion, a massive roaring beast that crossed Samson's path as he traveled to Timnah. The lion attacked, but Samson didn't flinch. With his bare hands, he tore the lion apart. It was a display of raw, unimaginable power, but it was also a warning that Samson's strength came with a cost he didn't yet understand. Samson didn't tell his parents about the lion. Why? Was it shame, fear, or something deeper? Because here's the thing about strength: it can be a blessing or a curse. And Samson was about to learn that the hard way. He ate the honey. Sweet, forbidden honey from the carcass of an unclean animal. A small act of rebellion. A small step toward disobedience. But in that moment something shifted. Something dangerous. Because when you start bending the rules, even just a little, it's only a matter of time before they break. Samson's strength was unmatched, but his weakness, that was just beginning to show, and in the shadows, someone was watching. Someone who would change everything. Stay with me, because the story of Samson is just getting started, and so is the danger. The first encounter, Timnah. A Philistine city, a place Samson had no business being, but here he was, drawn by something he couldn't quite name. Was it curiosity, defiance, or something deeper, something darker? Because in the crowd he saw her, a woman, beautiful, alluring, and forbidden. Samson knew the rules. He knew what his parents would say. Don't marry a Philistine, Samson. Don't even look at one. But rules have a way of bending when desire takes hold. And Samson? He was already bending. She was everything he wasn't supposed to want. A foreigner, an idolater, a daughter of the enemy. And yet, in that moment, none of that mattered. All that mattered was the way she looked at him, the way she made him feel, powerful, desired, alive. But here's the question: was it love or lust? And does it even matter when the stakes are this high? His father tried to stop him. Samson, this is a mistake. She's not one of us. She'll lead you astray. But Samson wasn't listening. He was too far gone, too caught up in the thrill of the forbidden. And so he made a decision that would change everything. Samson didn't know it yet, but this was the beginning of the end. The first step on a path that would lead to betrayal, heartbreak, and ruin. Because when you play with fire, you don't just get burned, you get consumed. She had a secret, a plan. And Samson, he was too blinded by desire to see it. But the question remains, what was her game, and how far would she go to win? Stay with me, because the story of Samson is about to take a dangerous turn, and the price of lust is about to come due. Let's find out what happens next. The lion and the honey. Samson was a man of contradictions. A Nazirite set apart for God, yet drawn to the forbidden. A deliverer of Israel, yet entangled with the enemy. And now, as he walked through the valley, he was about to face another contradiction. A moment of triumph that would also be a moment of failure. The lion attacked. A beast of raw power and fury, its roar shaking the very ground. But Samson? He didn't run. He didn't falter. With his bare hands, he tore the lion apart. It was a display of strength that defied explanation. A miracle. But miracles have a way of blinding us to the dangers within. He didn't tell his parents about the lion. Why? Was it because he knew they would disapprove? Or was it because deep down he knew he had crossed a line? Because here's the thing, The lion wasn't just a test of strength. It was a test of obedience, and Samson, he was starting to fail. The honey was sweet, too sweet, but it was also forbidden. A Nazarite wasn't supposed to touch a dead body, let alone eat from it. Yet Samson did it anyway. A small act of rebellion, a small step toward disobedience. But in that moment something shifted. Something dangerous. His father knew. He could see the change in Samson. The pride, the recklessness, the growing disregard for the rules that had defined his life, and he feared what it meant. Because when you start bending the rules, even just a little, it's only a matter of time before they break. Samson thought he was in control. He thought his strength made him invincible. But he was wrong. Because in the shadows, someone was watching. Someone who would use his weakness against him. Stay with me, because the story of Samson is about to take a dangerous turn, and the price of lust is about to come due. Let's find out what happens next. The wedding feast. The wedding feast was supposed to be a celebration, a union of two people, two families, two worlds. But for Samson, it was something else entirely. A test, a trap, and the beginning of a game he didn't even know he was playing. Samson knew he didn't belong here. These were his enemies, his people's oppressors, and yet he couldn't resist the allure of the feast, the wine, the woman by his side. But here's the question. Was he the hunter or the hunted? The Philistines had a plan, a riddle, a challenge designed to humiliate Samson, to expose his weakness. And Samson, he walked right into it, because pride has a way of blinding us to the dangers around us. Out of the eater, something to eat. Out of the strong, something sweet. Solve my riddle, and I'll give you 30 linen garments and 30 sets of clothes. But if you can't, you'll owe me the same. The riddle was a boast, a reminder of his strength, his victory over the lion. But it was also a mistake. Because when you provoke your enemies, you don't just challenge them, you unite them. And the Philistines, they were more than ready to play along. She had a choice, loyalty to her husband or loyalty to her people. And in that moment, she made her decision. But what was it? And how far would she go to protect her own? Stay with me, because the wedding feast is about to take a dangerous turn, and the price of lust is about to come due. Let's find out what happens next. Betrayal often begins with a whisper, a secret shared in the shadows, a choice made in the dark. And for Samson's bride, that choice had already been made. But here's the question. Was it fear that drove her, or something else? And how far would she go to protect herself? You hate me, you don't really love me, you've given my people a riddle, but you haven't told me the answer. Samson had underestimated her. He thought she was on his side. But love, real love, requires trust. And trust, that was in short supply. Because when you build a relationship on lust, on rebellion, on defiance, it's only a matter of time before it crumbles. She had what she wanted, the answer, the key to Samson's humiliation. But at what cost? Because betrayal doesn't just hurt the betrayed, it changes the betrayer. And Samson's bride? She was about to learn that the hard way. The trap was set, the betrayal complete. But what would Samson do when he discovered the truth? And what would it cost him? And her, in the end. Stay with me, because the wedding feast is about to explode into chaos, and the price of lust is about to come due. Betrayal is a bitter pill to swallow, but for Samson it was more than that. It was a spark that ignited the fire of his rage. And when Samson was angry, people paid the price. Philistine leader. What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion? Samson knew what had happened. His bride had betrayed him, his secret was out, and the Philistines, they were laughing. But here's the thing about Samson. He didn't just feel anger, he felt shame. And shame, for a man like Samson, was unbearable. If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle, Samson growled. It was an insult, a threat, and a promise. Because Samson wasn't just angry, he was dangerous. And when a dangerous man is humiliated, the consequences are never small. But Samson wasn't done, not even close. Because revenge, for him, wasn't just about settling a score. It was about proving something. To the Philistines, to his bride, to himself, that he was still the strongest, that he was still in control, that he could not, would not be defeated. What happened next would be remembered for generations, an act of vengeance so brutal, so shocking, that it would cement Samson's legacy, for better or for worse. But at what cost? Because revenge doesn't just hurt the target, it changes the one who seeks it. Stay with me, because the story of Samson is about to take a darker turn, and the price of lust is about to come due. The abandoned bride. Revenge is never clean. It leaves scars on the land, on the soul, and on the hearts of those caught in its wake. And for Samson's bride, the scars were just beginning, because when the dust settled, she was left with nothing. No husband, no honor, no future. She had betrayed him. But in doing so, she had also betrayed herself. Because now she was alone, abandoned. And the Philistines, they didn't see her as a hero. They saw her as a pawn, a tool. And tools, once used, are often discarded. Samson had left her, and the Philistines, they had no use for her anymore. She was given to another man, a friend of the bridegroom, a cruel twist of fate, a bitter reminder that betrayal, no matter the reason, always comes with a price. Samson didn't look back. He couldn't, because looking back would mean facing what he had done. To the Philistines, to his bride, to himself. And Samson? He wasn't ready for that. Not yet. But the question remains, could he ever outrun the consequences of his choices, or would they follow him like a shadow for the rest of his life? Samson's story was far from over, but the cracks were beginning to show. Cracks in his strength, cracks in his faith, cracks in his soul. And when those cracks finally broke, the fallout would be catastrophic. Stay with me, because the story of Samson is about to take a darker turn, and the price of lust is about to come due. Let's find out what happens next. Samson was a man caught in a cycle of strength and weakness, of triumph and failure, of obedience and rebellion. And with every turn of the wheel, the stakes grew higher, the consequences grew darker, and the cracks in his soul grew deeper. He had walked away from the wedding feast, walked away from the carnage, walked away from her. But could he ever truly walk away from the choices he had made? Because here's the thing about cycles. They don't end on their own. Someone has to break them. And Samson, he wasn't ready to break anything, except maybe himself. His strength was unmatched, his victories legendary, but his weakness? That was his undoing. Because every time he gave in to his desires, every time he let his pride rule his actions, he lost a piece of himself. And the question is, how much could he lose before there was nothing left? Samson wasn't done, not yet. Because the cycle wasn't broken, and until it was, he would keep fighting, keep failing, keep falling. But here's the twist. The next time he fell, it wouldn't just be him who paid the price. What was he planning? Another act of revenge? Another display of strength? Or something darker, something more desperate? Because when a man is caught in a cycle, he'll do anything to keep it spinning, even if it destroys him. Stay with me. Because the story of Samson is about to take a darker turn, and the price of lust is about to come due. Let's find out what happens next. Even the strongest among us need guidance, a voice of wisdom, a warning. But what happens when that warning is ignored? When pride drowns out reason? When desire overrides destiny? For Samson, the answer would come at a cost too great to bear. Samson, you were chosen by God, set apart for a purpose, but your strength is not your own. It is a gift, and gifts can be taken away. I know my strength, I know my purpose, and I don't need anyone to remind me. The warning was clear, the danger real. But Samson, he wasn't listening. Because when you're strong, when you're invincible, when you're untouchable, it's easy to forget that you're also human. And humans, they fall. Samson didn't see it then, the cracks in his armor, the cracks in his soul. But they were there, growing, spreading, and soon they would shatter everything he thought he was. What would it take for Samson to see the truth, to recognize the danger he was in? And when he finally did, would it be too late? Stay with me, because the story of Samson is about to take a darker turn, and the price of lust is about to come due. Let's find out what happens next. The allure of Delilah. The meeting. Every story has a turning point, a moment when everything changes. For Samson, that moment came in the form of a woman whose name would echo through history as a symbol of betrayal, a woman named Delilah. She was beautiful, there was no denying that. But beauty, as Samson would soon learn, can be a mask that hides danger, a mask that hides deceit. And Delilah, she was a master of masks. Samson thought he was in control. He thought he could handle her. But Delilah, she was playing a game she had played before. And Samson, he was about to become her next victim. Here's the thing about Delilah. She wasn't just beautiful. She was cunning, ruthless, and she had a mission given to her by the Philistines, a mission to uncover the secret of Samson's strength. But how far would she go to succeed, and how much would Samson be willing to give? Samson knew the risks, he knew the warnings, but here's the question, why did he ignore them? Was it lust, loneliness, or something deeper, something darker? Because when a man like Samson falls, he doesn't just fall, he crashes, and the fallout, it's catastrophic. What was Delilah planning? And how much would Samson lose before he realized the truth? Because the price of lust is always higher than you think. Stay with me, because the story of Samson is about to take a darker turn, and the price of lust is about to come due. The seduction. Seduction is an art, a dance of words, of glances, of touches. And Delilah, she was an artist. Every word, every gesture, every smile was a brushstroke on the canvas of Samson's heart. But here's the question. Was it love she was painting, or a trap? Samson knew the risks, he knew the warnings, but in that moment, none of it mattered, because Delilah had a way of making him forget his calling, forget his vows, forget everything but her. Delilah, tell me, Samson, where does your great strength come from? How could anyone ever tie you up and make you helpless? It was a simple question, innocent even. But here's the thing about simple questions. They're rarely just questions. They're tests, probes. And Delilah, she was a master at asking them. Samson, if anyone ties me with 7 fresh bowstrings that have not been dried, I'll become as weak as any other man. Samson thought he was playing a game of wit, of charm, of seduction, but Delilah, she was playing for keeps, and the stakes, they were higher than he could imagine. What was Delilah planning, and how much would Samson lose before he realized the truth? Because the price of lust is always higher than you think. Stay with me, because the story of Samson is about to take a darker turn, and the price of lust is about to come due. Let's find out what happens next. The first test. Trust is a fragile thing, easily given, easily broken. And for Samson, trust would be his undoing, because in the quiet of the night, while he slept, Delilah made her move, the first test of his strength, the first step toward his downfall. She had his answer, his secret, or so she thought. But here's the thing about secrets. they're rarely what they seem. And Delilah? She was about to learn that the hard way. Delilah. Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He was awake, and he was angry, but not at the Philistines, not yet, at her. Because in that moment Samson realized the truth. Delilah was playing a game, a dangerous game, and he was the prize. The Philistines attacked, but Samson, he was ready. With a roar he charged, his strength unmatched, his fury unstoppable. The soldiers fell like wheat before a scythe, their cries echoing through the night. Samson turned to her, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and betrayal. But here's the question. Why didn't he leave? Why didn't he walk away? Because the truth is, Samson wasn't just strong, he was stubborn. And Delilah? She wasn't done yet. Delilah, you lied to me, Samson. You made a fool of me, but I know you love me. Tell me the truth this time. What would he do? Would he tell her the truth? Or would he lie again? Because the stakes were higher than ever, and the price of lust? It was about to come due. Stay with me, because the story of Samson is about to take a darker turn, and the price of lust is about to come due. Let's find out what happens next. The second test. Trust once broken is hard to rebuild. But Delilah wasn't trying to rebuild trust. She was trying to break Samson, piece by piece, secret by secret, and she was willing to play the long game to do it. Delilah, you lied to me, Samson. You made me look like a fool in front of my people. If you truly love me, you'll tell me the truth this time. Samson was torn. Part of him wanted to trust her, to believe that she loved him as much as he loved her. But another part of him, the part that had seen betrayal before, knew better. And yet, he stayed. Because love, or what he thought was love, has a way of clouding even the strongest minds. Samson, if anyone ties me securely with new ropes that have never been used, I'll become as weak as any other man. She had her answer, or so she thought. But here's the thing about Samson. He was a master of half-truths, a weaver of lies. And Delilah? She was about to learn that the hard way. The second test, the second betrayal. But this time Delilah was confident. This time she was sure she had the truth. And this time, she was wrong. Delilah. Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He was awake, and he was furious. But not just at the Philistines, at her. Because in that moment, Samson realized the truth. Delilah wasn't just playing a game, she was playing with his life. Samson turned to her, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and betrayal. But here's the question. Why didn't he leave? Why didn't he walk away? Because the truth is, Samson wasn't just strong. He was stubborn. And Delilah? She wasn't done yet. Delilah, you lied to me again, Samson, but I know you love me. Tell me the truth this time. What would he do? Would he tell her the truth, or would he lie again because the stakes were higher than ever, and the price of lust, it was about to come due? Stay with me, because the story of Samson is about to take a darker turn, and the price of lust is about to come due. Let's find out what happens next. The third test. 3 times, 3 tests, 3 betrayals, and yet Samson stayed. Why? Was it love, obsession, or something darker, something deeper? Because here's the thing about cycles. They don't end until someone breaks them, and Samson? He wasn't ready to break anything, except maybe himself. Delilah, you've lied to me twice now, Samson. You mock me. You make me look like a fool. If you truly love me, you'll tell me the truth this time. Samson was tired of the games, tired of the lies, but most of all he was tired of the doubt in her eyes, the doubt in his heart, and so he gave her another answer, another half-truth, another step closer to the edge. Samson, if you weave the 7 braids of my head into the fabric on your loom and tighten it with a pin, I'll become as weak as any other man. She had her answer, Or so she thought. But here's the thing about Samson. He was a master of deception, a weaver of lies. And Delilah? She was about to learn that the hard way. The third test, the third betrayal. But this time Delilah was confident. This time she was sure she had the truth. And this time she was wrong. Delilah. Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He was awake, and he was furious. But not just at the Philistines, at her. Because in that moment Samson realized the truth. Delilah wasn't just playing a game, she was playing with his life. Samson turned to her, his eyes burning with a mix of anger and betrayal. But here's the question, why didn't he leave? Why didn't he walk away? Because the truth is, Samson wasn't just strong, he was stubborn. And Delilah? She wasn't done yet. You've lied to me 3 times now, Samson, but I know you love me. Tell me the truth this time. What would he do? Would he tell her the truth? Or would he lie again? Because the stakes were higher than ever. And the price of lust, it was about to come due. Stay with me, because the story of Samson is about to take a darker turn, and the price of lust is about to come due. Let's find out what happens next. The trap. Betrayal is a knife, sharp, cold, unforgiving, and Delilah, she was about to plunge it deep into Samson's heart. But this wasn't just betrayal, this was destruction. The destruction of a man, the destruction of a calling, the destruction of a legacy. She had tried 3 times, 3 times she had failed. But this time would be different. Because this time she had the truth, the real truth. And the truth in the wrong hands is the most dangerous weapon of all. Samson slept, unaware, unprepared. And in that moment of vulnerability, Delilah struck. She cut his hair, the source of his strength, the symbol of his vow, the mark of his calling. And with every strand that fell, Samson's power slipped away. Delilah, voiceover. Samson, the Philistines are upon you. He was awake, but he was weak. For the first time in his life, Samson felt fear. Real fear. Because in that moment he realized the truth. Delilah had won, and he had lost everything. They bound him, they blinded him, they dragged him away like an animal. And Delilah, she watched. Her face unreadable, her heart untouched, because betrayal, for her, was just another move in the game, a game she had won. Samson was gone. His strength, his power, his calling, all gone. But here's the question. What happens when a man loses everything? Does he give up? Or does he find a way to rise again? Stay with me, because the story of Samson is far from over, and the price of lust is about to come due. Let's find out what happens next. The fall of a hero. The captive. Strength, power, glory. These were the words that once defined Samson, but now he was defined by different words. Weakness, shame, captivity. The strongest man who ever lived had been brought to his knees, not by an army, not by a sword, but by his own weakness. And the price? It was higher than anyone could have imagined. Samson had lost everything, his strength, his freedom, his sight. But here's the question, had he lost his faith? Because in the darkness of that prison cell, with the echoes of Philistine laughter ringing in his ears, Samson had a choice. A choice to give up, or to rise again. Philistine guard. Where's your strength now, mighty Samson? Where's your God? The taunts cut deep, deeper than the chains, deeper than the blindness. Because here's the thing about shame. It doesn't just hurt, it destroys. And Samson, he was being destroyed, piece by piece, moment by moment. He had been a hero, a deliverer, a legend, but now he was a cautionary tale, a warning, a reminder of the price of lust, of pride, of disobedience. But here's the twist. The story wasn't over. Not yet. Because even in the darkest moments there is hope. And Samson? He was about to find it. Samson, voiceover. Lord, remember me. Strengthen me just once more. Samson's prayer was simple, desperate. But here's the question. Would it be answered? And if it was, what would he do with that strength? Because the stakes were higher than ever. And the price of lust? It was about to come due. Stay with me, because the story of Samson is about to take a dramatic turn, and the price of lust is about to come due. Let's find out what happens next. The mockery. Humiliation is a slow death. A death of the spirit. A death of the soul. And for Samson, that death was playing out in front of his enemies. The man who once struck fear into the hearts of the Philistines was now their entertainment, their trophy, their mockery. They laughed, they jeered, they taunted. Where is your strength now, Samson? Where is your God? But here's the thing about mockery. It reveals more about the mocker than the mocked, because in their triumph the Philistines had forgotten one thing. Samson's God was not done with him yet. Philistine leader. Behold the mighty Samson, the man who tore down our cities, the man who slaughtered our warriors. Now he is nothing but a blind fool. Samson said nothing. He simply stood there, his head bowed, his body trembling. But here's the question. What was going through his mind? Was it regret, anger, or something deeper, something that would change everything? He had been a hero, a deliverer, a legend. But now he was a cautionary tale, a warning, a reminder of the price of lust, of pride, of disobedience. But here's the twist. The story wasn't over, not yet, because even in the darkest moments, there is hope. And Samson, he was about to find it. The ripple effect. Every action has a consequence. Every choice creates a ripple. And Samson's life, his triumphs, his failures, his final sacrifice, sent ripples through the hearts of the Israelites. But here's the question. What would they do with those ripples? Would they let them fade into silence? Or would they turn them into waves of change? Samson's story is not just his own, it is ours. It is a mirror held up to our own weaknesses, our own failures. But it is also a call to action. A call to rise above our flaws and seek the strength that comes from obedience to God. Young man, I see myself in Samson. I see my pride, my lust, my disobedience, but I also see the chance to change, to turn back to God before it's too late. Samson's story was a warning about the dangers of pride, of lust, of disobedience. But it was also a story of hope, because even in his darkest moment, Samson turned back to God, and in that moment, he found redemption. Elder, let us not mourn Samson's death, but learn from his life. Let us remember that our strength comes not from ourselves, but from God. And let us strive to live in obedience, so that we may not fall as he did. The Israelites had lost their deliverer, but they had gained something far more valuable, a lesson, a reminder, a chance to start anew. Because here's the thing about failure. It's not the end. It's an opportunity to learn, to grow, to become better. What would the Israelites do with this lesson? How would they move forward? And what would Samson's legacy mean for the generations to come? Stay with me, because the story of Samson is not just about one man, it's about all of us. And the price of lust, it's a lesson we all must learn. Let's find out what happens next. The legacy lives on. Legacy is not just about what we leave behind, it's about what we build with the lessons we've learned. And for the Israelites, Samson's legacy was not just a story of failure, it was a blueprint for redemption, a reminder that even in our darkest moments, we can rise again. Elder, Samson was a man of great strength, but also great weakness. He was chosen by God, yet he chose his own path. He saved us, yet he fell because of his own desires. But in the end, he showed us the power of repentance, the power of turning back to God. Young boy, Samson's story was a warning about the dangers of pride, of lust, of disobedience. But it was also a story of hope, because even in his darkest moment, Samson turned back to God, and in that moment, he found redemption. Elder, remember, strength is not just about power, it's about obedience, it's about faith, and it's about knowing that even when we fall, God is always ready to lift us up. The Israelites had lost their deliverer, but they had gained something far more valuable, a lesson, a reminder, a chance to start anew. Because here's the thing about failure. It's not the end. It's an opportunity to learn, to grow, to become better. What would this new generation do with the lessons of Samson? How would they shape the future of Israel? And what would his legacy mean for the generations to come? Stay with me. Samson was a man of unparalleled strength, a warrior destined for greatness, chosen by God to deliver his people. But with his immense power came an equally immense weakness. His story is one of triumph and tragedy, of divine calling and human failing, of the battle between purpose and desire. It is a story not just of one man, but of all who have ever struggled with temptation, of all who have ever faced the consequences of their own choices. Before his birth, an angel appeared to his mother, declaring that he would be a Nazirite, set apart for God's purpose. No razor was to touch his head, no wine was to pass his lips. His life was to be one of holiness, of devotion, of unwavering commitment. And in return, God granted him strength beyond measure, the power to vanquish armies, to tear lions apart with his bare hands, to bring entire buildings crashing down. But strength alone does not make a man righteous. Power without discipline, without obedience, is a dangerous thing. Samson's first mistake was not in his strength, but in his heart. He longed for what was forbidden. He desired the very thing that would lead to his downfall. He fell in love with a Philistine woman, a people who were the enemies of Israel. Against his parents' warnings, against the wisdom of his people, he pursued her. Lust clouded his judgment and pride silenced his obedience. He believed himself invincible, untouchable, immune to the consequences of his actions. And yet, time and again, his weaknesses were exploited. His love for women led him into traps, into betrayals, into a slow and steady unraveling of the destiny God had laid before him. He tested the limits of his strength, toying with danger, believing that he could never truly fall. But no man, no matter how strong, can stand when his foundation is built on sand. Delilah was his greatest test and his greatest failure. She was not the first woman to betray him, but she was the one who would bring about his undoing. She asked for the secret of his strength, and so he told her. He revealed the secret that was never meant to be spoken. And, as he slept, she had his hair cut. But Samson's story did not end in failure. Even in the depths of his suffering, even in the darkness of his captivity, he found his way back to God. Humbled, broken, stripped of everything he had once relied upon, he turned to the one source of true strength. He prayed. His final act was not one of vengeance, but of redemption. He was brought before the Philistine leaders, mocked, humiliated, displayed as a trophy of their victory. But as they laughed, as they celebrated, Samson placed his hands on the pillars of the temple fell. The enemies of Israel were defeated, and Samson in his final moments fulfilled his purpose. He died with the Philistines, but his legacy lived on. His life was a warning, a testament to the dangers of pride, of unchecked desire, of disobedience, but it was also a story of hope, because even at our lowest, even when we have lost everything, we can still return to God. We can still find redemption. The lesson of Samson is not just one for ancient Israel, it is for us today. How often do we chase after the things that will destroy us? How often do we believe that we are in control, that our strength, our power, our gifts are our own? How often do we ignore the warnings, dismiss the wisdom of those who love us, and walk blindly into the traps set before us? The price of lust, of pride, of disobedience is always higher than we think. It costs us more than we are willing to pay. It takes from us more than we ever imagined losing. But there is hope. There is always hope. Because no matter how far we fall, no matter how broken we become, God is still there, waiting, ready to restore us, ready to give us strength once more. Samson's story is not just about one man, it is about all of us. It is about the choices we make, the battles we fight, the redemption we can find. The question is, will we learn from him, or will we repeat his mistakes? Stay with me, because the story of Samson is far from over, and what comes next may change everything. The flickering oil lamp cast long shadows across the dimly lit room, its light barely illuminating the faces of the gathered young Israelites. They sat in silence, their backs pressed against the cold earthen walls, the weight of history pressing down upon them as they listened to the elders speak. His voice, deep and resonant, carried an urgency that none dared to ignore. In his gnarled hands he held the scroll of Samson's story, an ancient testament to both greatness and downfall. Strength, the elder began, his gaze sweeping over the group, is not just about power. It is about knowing one's weaknesses. And Samson's greatest weakness was not his lack of strength. It was his inability to see his own flaws. But here is the question. Do we see ours? Or are we, like Samson, blind to the dangers within? A hush settled over the group. A young woman, her face pale in the dim light, clenched her hands together. She had heard the tales of Samson before, but tonight they felt different, personal. She lowered her gaze, her heart pounding, as the elder continued. Samson's strength was unmatched, the elder intoned, his voice like the steady rhythm of a drum. He could tear apart a lion with his bare hands, yet he could not resist the pull of desire. He could defeat an army, yet he could not conquer his own heart. What does that tell us about ourselves? Silence reigned, thick and suffocating. The young woman raised her head slightly, her voice barely above a whisper. I see my own weakness in Samson, she admitted, her words trembling in the still air. I see the times I have chosen my desires over God's will, the times I have let pride guide my decisions. But I don't want to end up like him. I don't want to pay the price of lust, the elder nodded solemnly. Then listen well. Samson's story is a warning about the dangers of pride, of lust, of disobedience. But it is also a story of hope, because even in his darkest moment, Samson turned back to God. And in that moment, he found redemption. The camera of history zoomed out, revealing not just a fallen man, but a fallen people. A people who had turned from God and paid the price. The Israelites had lost their deliverer, but they had gained something far more valuable, a lesson. A chance to start anew, but would they take it? Obedience, the elder said, his voice a mere whisper now, is not just a choice. It is a lifeline, a tether that keeps us anchored to God's will, even when the storms of desire rage around us. And for Samson, that tether was broken. But what about us? Are we holding on? Or are we, like Samson, letting go? The young man sitting in the corner shifted uncomfortably. His dark eyes flickered with something akin to recognition, but he remained silent. The elder's gaze lingered on him before continuing. Samson's disobedience cost him everything. He was chosen by God, set apart for a purpose, but he chose his own path. He chose his desires over his calling, and in the end he paid the ultimate price. But his story is not just his own, it is ours. It is a warning, a call to action, a reminder that the price of disobedience is higher than we think. The young man finally spoke, his voice hoarse. I see my own disobedience in Samson. I see the times I have chosen my desires over God's will, the times I have let pride guide my decisions. But I don't want to end up like him. I don't want to pay the price of disobedience. The elder offered him a knowing smile. Then learn from Samson. Learn before it is too late. The elder unrolled the scroll further, revealing the final chapter of Samson's life. His fall, his shame, his ultimate act of sacrifice. Samson lost his strength, his freedom, his sight. But in his darkest hour he did not turn away from God. He turned back to him. and in that moment he found redemption. The young woman from earlier wiped a tear from her cheek. "I don't want to wait until it's too late," she whispered. "I want to turn back now." "Then do so," the elder urged. "Let Samson's story be a warning, yes, but let it also be a lesson. Let it teach you that even the mightiest fall, but God's mercy is greater than our failures." A sense of resolve settled over the room. The young Israelites, once gripped by fear, now held something else in their hearts: determination. They would not be like Samson. They would learn from his mistakes. They would choose obedience, strength, redemption. And as the elder closed the scroll, the flickering lamp seemed to burn a little brighter. The silence in the room was heavy, laden with the weight of Samson's choices. The elder slowly sat back, his fingers tracing the edges of the ancient scroll. His eyes, filled with wisdom and sorrow, rested upon the young Israelites. "Disobedience," he said, his voice carrying a quiet authority, "is a slow chain, one link at a time. Samson did not lose his strength in a single moment. He lost it over years of compromise. And that, my children, is the real danger. Not the enemy outside, but the slow erosion of conviction within." A young man clenched his fists, his jaw tightening. "So what are we supposed to do? If even Samson, a man of such strength, failed, how can we hope to stand?" The elder smiled knowingly. "By remembering that our strength does not come from ourselves. It comes from God." Samson's downfall was not just because of Delilah, it was because he had long ceased to walk with God. He saw his strength as his own. He thought himself invincible. But in the end, the enemy did not truly defeat him. He defeated himself. A murmur rippled through the room, the weight of the elder's words settling upon their shoulders like an unseen burden. The oil lamp flickered, casting shifting shadows across their faces, mirroring the thoughts racing through their minds. The elder leaned forward, the glow of the lamp illuminating the deep creases in his face. "Let me take you to the moment of his betrayal," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "The moment when Samson, mighty Samson, lost everything." The young woman who had spoken earlier hugged her knees to her chest, bracing herself for what she knew was coming. She had heard of Delilah, heard of the lies, heard of the silver paid for his secret, and yet, hearing it now, in the hush of the room, made it all the more real. Delilah whispered to him, pleaded with him night after night. "Tell me the source of your strength," she begged. And at first he lied, playing games, thinking himself clever, but sin is never a game. The elder paused, allowing the words to sink in, and then, one fateful night, he gave in. He told her. He trusted the wrong person, and in that moment he was undone. When he awoke, bound, shaven, helpless before his enemies, he realized the most terrifying truth of all. He let out a slow breath before speaking the words that echoed across history. He did not know that the Lord had left him. A shiver ran through the group. The idea that Samson, the strongest man who had ever lived, could be abandoned by the very God who had blessed him, it was a horror beyond comprehension. "That," the elder said, "is the price of betrayal. Not just Delilah's betrayal, but Samson's own. He betrayed himself. He betrayed God. And the price was his power, his freedom, his very identity." The elder's voice softened, turning somber. Samson was taken in chains to Gaza, the very place where he had once triumphed over his enemies. But now they paraded him through the streets, a broken man. They gouged out his eyes, the very eyes that had led him into sin time and time again. It was as if God was showing him, "You will no longer be ruled by what you see." A single tear slipped down the young woman's cheek. Was there no hope for him? There was, the elder said gently. For though they took his eyes, they could not take his faith. Though they bound his hands, they could not bind his spirit. And as he sat in the prison, grinding grain like a slave, his hair began to grow again. A flicker of light returned to the room, a shift in the atmosphere. The elder leaned in. And with it, so did his strength. The elder closed his eyes for a moment, his mind wandering back to the ancient past. Samson was led into the great temple of Dagon, a mockery to all that he had once been. Thousands of Philistines gathered to watch his humiliation, and in that moment, with nothing left but faith, he prayed, his voice deepened, resonating with power. Lord God, remember me, I pray. Strengthen me just this once, O God, that I may take vengeance on the Philistines for my 2 eyes. The room was deathly still, and the Lord heard him. A shudder ran through the group, as the elder spoke of how Samson, with his last breath, pushed against the pillars of the temple, how the ground trembled, how the mighty structure collapsed, burying Samson and his enemies in its ruin. He died as he had lived, fierce, passionate, flawed, but in his death he found redemption. He turned back to God, and in that moment he fulfilled his purpose. The elder looked around the room, his eyes locking onto each young Israelite. Let us not mourn Samson's death, but learn from his life. Let us remember that our strength comes not from ourselves, but from God, and let us strive to live in obedience, so that we may not fall as he did. The Israelites had lost their deliverer, but they had gained something far more valuable, a lesson, a reminder, a chance to start anew. A young man rose to his feet, his face resolute. We will not forget Samson. We will not forget what he taught us. The elder nodded. Then take this lesson and carry it forward. Let his fall be your warning. Let his faith be your strength. And let his story be a call to righteousness. Outside, the horizon began to lighten, the first golden rays of dawn creeping over the hills of Israel. A new day had come. Every choice has a consequence. Every mistake leaves a scar. Samson's life, his strength, his pride, his fall, was more than just a tragedy. It was a turning point. But the question remains, what did the Israelites do with the lessons he left behind? Did they rise, or did they fall once more into the abyss of their own weaknesses? Samson's story is not just about him, it is about us. It is about what happens when we stray from God's path. His strength was his gift, but his weakness was his downfall, and in that we must find our warning. We must ask ourselves, what will we do differently? We have learned our lesson, but at what cost? The Philistines still walk our land, they still mock our God. Samson's sacrifice was great, but what did it change? If we do not rise now, if we do not strike them while they are weak, then was his death in vain? Vengeance without wisdom is folly. That is what Samson's life teaches us. He fought, he killed, but his greatest moment was not in his strength, it was in his surrender to God. And if we do not understand that, then we will fall into the same trap that ensnared him. Strength is a fleeting thing. Power comes and goes. But wisdom? That is eternal. Samson's greatest failure was not his captivity. It was his blindness before he lost his sight. The blindness of arrogance, of desire, of believing that he could wield his gift without consequence. But when he fell, he learned. And in his final act, he chose obedience. He chose faith, and that is why, even in death, he triumphed. I do not want to make the same mistakes. I want to be strong like Samson, but not in the same way. I want to be strong in my faith. Then remember this. True strength is not in muscle. It is not in war. It is in obedience to God. It is in knowing when to fight and when to kneel. Samson's fall was great, but his return to God was greater. Do not forget that. The Israelites had lost their deliverer, but they had gained something far more valuable, a lesson, a call to action, a chance to write a new future. Because failure is not the end, it is an opportunity, a doorway to something greater, if only we are willing to walk through it. What will this new generation do with the lessons of Samson? How will they shape the future of Israel? And will they rise or will they fall? Stay with me. We have learned our lesson, but at what cost? The Philistines still walk our land. They still mock our God. Samson's sacrifice was great, but what did it change? If we do not rise now, if we do not strike them while they are weak, then was his death in vain? His life was not merely for spectacle. He fought for us, bled for us, and in the end died for us. And yet we sit here speaking of lessons while our enemies still breathe, still hold our people in chains, still desecrate the name of the Almighty. Tell me, elders, are we to be known as the people who let the legacy of their greatest warrior fade into dust? Or will we be the ones who finish what he started? Vengeance without wisdom is folly. That is what Samson's life teaches us. He fought, he killed, but his greatest moment was not in his strength. It was in his surrender to God. And if we do not understand that, then we will fall into the same trap that ensnared him. A man who lifts his hand in anger without direction is no better than the enemy he seeks to destroy. If we move now, consumed by rage, then we are nothing but another Samson in chains, blinded, bound to the fate of self-destruction. Then what do? Sit and wait for God to hand us victory? Didn't Samson act? Didn't he take matters into his own hands? Why is it that every time we suffer, we are told to be patient? Why must we always be the ones to endure while our enemies thrive? You mistake patience for weakness. But tell me, young one, did Samson's rage save him? Did his defiance bring him peace? His strength was unmatched, his victories were many, but his chains were forged by his own hands. We do not wait for victory to be handed to us. We prepare for it. We seek God and we wait for his time, because if we fight on our own terms, we will fall just as he did. Strength is a fleeting thing. Power comes and goes, but wisdom, that is eternal. Samson's greatest failure was not his captivity, it was his blindness before he lost his sight. The blindness of arrogance, of desire, of believing that he could wield his gift without consequence. But when he fell, he learned. And in his final act, he chose obedience, he chose faith. And that is why, even in death, he triumphed. I do not want to make the same mistakes. I want to be strong like Samson, but not in the same way. I want to be strong in my faith. Because the story of Samson is not just about one man, it is about all of us. And the price of lust, the cost of disobedience, it is a lesson we all must learn. Samson's story is a mirror for us all. It challenges us to examine our own lives, our own weaknesses, and our own need for redemption. If this message resonated with you, don't keep it to yourself. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it. Like, comment, and subscribe to join our community as we explore more stories of faith, failure, and redemption. Together, let's learn from the past to build a stronger future. See you in the next video.